So thank you very much. And indeed, it's a great pleasure to be here and allow me to take the privilege of being the first speaker to express my gratitude to the organizers, Marcello, Christoph, Gregory, of course, the EPFL for providing institutional support and for making possible this great meeting. As mentioned, I'm here in my capacity of rapporteur of the study on neurotechnologies and human rights, and that has been submitted to the Human Rights Council this past September session. The study is the result of 2 years process of consultation and research, and to my knowledge is the first in providing a comprehensive overview of this topic from a purely human rights perspective. For those who are not familiar with the UN system, the Advisory Committee is a subsidiary body of the Human Rights Council, serving as a think tank. So we are 18 independent experts with different backgrounds and coming from all regions from the world. And the committee is a permanent body and meets twice per year in Geneva. And our main function is to elaborate studies on complex and forward-looking topics at the request of the Council. The Human Rights Council, I need also to explain for those who are not familiar, is the main UN forum where human rights issues are discussed among states. In October 2022, the Human Rights Council adopted by consensus a resolution requesting us, the Advisory Committee, to draft a study on opportunities, challenges, and impacts of neurotechnologies on human rights, and to provide action-oriented recommendations. So I know that this afternoon we have a panel, so the nuances of the legal aspects will be developed and we will have the time to discuss. So I will very briefly delve with some of the context of the reports, the recommendations, and some of the insights on the follow-up. The report builds on the work already done by basically the human rights bodies from the UN system. Also, we have analyzed all the scholarship, of course, all the discussion and debate on neuro rights and framework. We have read all these kind of documents and we have followed very closely the discussion. Obviously, we have also been inspired by the activities of the International Bioethics Committee of the UNESCO. We are, of course, very grateful for all the inputs we receive. We made a questionnaire and we received inputs from scholars and also from different research groups and organizations and also from states. And we have also involved experts also from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and also independent experts, special rapporteurs relevant in our conversation. And also these inputs have been also taken into account in our report. I think this is a great network that we have created, with the excuse of this report, and I hope that this become a kind of platform for future exchange. The report provides an overview of promising developments in the field of neurotechnology, but also acknowledge impacts and risks, particularly when dealing with commercial applications. We think that finding a balance between beneficial uses and potential harms may be, in this context, challenging. Opportunities in the medical realm are undeniable, but at the same time, neurotechnology holds a potential to damage or disrupt the human psyche, affecting mental privacy, autonomy, and integrity in an unprecedented manner. Because the human rights implications of these technologies are unique, according to our report, a major question is whether existing legal frameworks are prepared and robust enough to ensure the preservation of human dignity and protection of rights being more significantly affected. Our analysis concludes that even if international human rights law provides an adequate and flexible principle-based framework to address the challenges of neurotechnology, because of the inherent and particular characteristics of these technologies, there are need to develop further tailor-made standards in certain areas. At the same time, the capacity of neurotechnologies to interfere with essential elements of the individual's personality, privacy, and also freedom of thought makes an urgent advancing mechanism, both at national and international levels, mechanism capable of protecting meaningfully people from human rights violations. And we think that in this context, these kind of violations may take uncertain and unknown shapes. Also, in view of the increasing power of technological multinationals, a question is if states are in a position of duly exercising its due diligence in regulating, monitoring, and sanctioning the conduct of companies, and if existing remedies can sufficiently and meaningfully protect people's rights from potential misuses and abuses. The analysis of the different national initiatives reveals that these are fragmented, uneven, and clearly insufficient to address in an anticipatory manner the complex human rights issues at stake in a globalized world, particularly bearing in mind the significant control that private actors keep on the development, deployment, and use of neurotechnology. A minimum of normative and regulatory coordination is a must. The main recommendation of our report is to integrate human rights approach in a coherent manner into all national policies through the development of an international soft law instrument, namely a set of guiding principles on the application of the human rights framework to neurotechnology. The advisory committee considers that the Human Rights Council should be launching as a matter of urgency a standard-setting process which should include a series of concerted actions. First, we consider that this topic should be kept into the Council's agenda to allow an open, inclusive, and transparent debate on the issue among all states. Secondly, we consider that as first step towards the international soft law instrument, our committee could take the advantage of the work done so far and also the expertise that we have gained to elaborate a first draft of these principles in a relatively short time. Thirdly, other human rights bodies and mechanisms within the UN could be more engaged in the development of these context-tailored standards, and in such way contribute also and complement this process. The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights is also key, and it can provide ideas for fruitful interaction between UN treaty bodies and special procedures in the construction of this new framework. We are hoping that the Council adopts a follow-up resolution in its next session in March 2025. But even if we cannot anticipate this outcome, we are willing that this happen, but we don't know. This is politics. It is a good sign, however, that during the interactive dialogue between the chair of the advisory committee and the Human Rights Council that took place in the 26th September, several states from all regions in the world showed their support for the findings of the study, and also some of them endorsed the recommendation of developing guiding principles. The Republic of Korea, to put an example, emphasized the importance of clear, universal, and easily accessible human rights normative guidance, and said that this document could be a starting point for states and stakeholders' policy development. Finally, allow me to finish like saying that in shaping this new framework, in my opinion, lawyers and legal scholars have a huge responsibility in promoting human rights in the policy and lawmaking processes. Today, as we know, access to justice for human rights violations and abuses appear in the context of new and emerging technologies illusory. So novel strict regulatory means may be needed to ensure that neurotechnology is developed for the good. All these unprecedented challenges force us to be creative in designing meaningful human rights protective frameworks, and I think also regulations and remedies, which are the indispensable condition for neurotechnologies to find its momentum. Thank you, and looking forward to your views. Thank you.
Thank you, Milena, to hear from you, and I hope we will continue this. So we have now asked two scholars to provide some short comments, and I would like to introduce now Kigo Kumamura he's a professor of law, public law, constitutional law, and politics at the Keio University in downtown Tokyo. Please come up.
Thank you for introducing me, Professor Babritz. So my name is Keigo Kumamura from Keio University. I'm teaching constitutional law. And first of all, I would like to thank you so much for giving me this great opportunity to make some comments from the legal perspectives on this comprehensive report and carefully and beautifully written report. I would like to thank you to be a part of this conference. This report tries to apply several rights concepts that are very familiar to the international community. And some of them already have textual basis in international legal law, like Universal Declaration of Human Rights and International Covenant on Human Rights, such as freedom of thought and privacy, and also right to personal integrity. But the human rights by themselves are just moral ideas or fundamental values. We as lawyers and legal scholars share the task to incorporate them into the national legal system and task to paraphrase them into a legally binding norm to solve the specific issues on the lawsuits. So this report mentioned that we should seek an actionable human rights approach as well. So along with this line, I would like to address 3 or 4 additional issues and one proposal to actualize a recommendation in this report. In the first place, we need to further elaborate on the rights concepts listed in this report. Among several rights concepts or candidate rights, freedom of thought is a flagship, of course. However, the content of this freedom is not sufficiently fixed so far, nor is clear the scope and the core of this freedom thoughts. And the mental privacy and personal integrity also not clear in its scope and characters either. So it would be very important important task to map the various concepts of these rights properly. The report, this report suggests that the same direction in paragraph 22 as well, stating that further clarification of freedom of thought is still needed in its scope and its attributes. In the second place, we need to focus on the cognitive process as a whole. Excuse me. And in the second, we need to focus on the cognitive process as a whole, not just on the nervous system. The nervous system alone does not work for human mental activity, as you know well. The nervous system is connected to the external environment outside the individual body through the sensory organs. The motor commands from the brain are submitted on this nervous system and make possible the interaction of the human body with the external environment. And then sensory feedbacks turn back to brain through the nervous system. In this way, human mental activity works only through this loop of the motor commands and sensory feedbacks. In other words, we cannot adequately address the impact of neurotech without considering a cognitive process as a whole, consisting of the several separate cognitive stages, the brain and the central peripheral nervous system, sensory organs, body, and external environment, and human communication in that cognitive process. So we must focus on this comprehensive platform of cognitive process or cognitive architectures. Cognitive architectures, Professor Yanka referred to the, yesterday. So, and we also praise the concept of rights such as freedom of thoughts, privacy, a right to integrity, personal integrity or the body integrity or something like that. We praise those kind of rights concept on this platform, cognitive process. And also we need to draw defense lines for legal protection for privacy or freedom of thoughts. We have to draw that kind of lines on this platform. So if so, we need to pay attention again in the scholarly concept, cognitive liberty. Cognitive liberty is a concept which is not often mentioned in this report and in the UNESCO recommendations either. But cognitive liberty is frequently mentioned or referred to or cited in the academic works. In the third place, as mentioned in this report, we also need to be aware of the issue of another critical technologies. I mean, artificial intelligence. Today, AI is an essential technology for brain tech, including BCI, BMI, or something like that. So we face a danger that human biases hidden in the big data will directly reflected in the neurotech. So not only that, but also AI-assisted neurotech can disguise or fabricate personal identity as well. People usually believe that their true identity are stored inside the brain. So, and this is, I think this is true generally speaking. But however, there are limits to accuracy of the brain information we can obtain through the neurotech. This is because of limitation of neuroimaging technologies and because of need to avoid the invasiveness to our body. So people may think that even if only low precision brain information and the roughly sketched brain imaging is obtained, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay because we obtain your information from your brain and in which a true identity lies. So let's ignore precision, or let's ignore roughly sketched imaging of the brain. So in any event, AI will compensate for it. AI can make up those problems. So AI-assisted identity is still your true identity, et cetera, et cetera. Even if the accuracy is low, as long as it comes from the brain, it must reflect it, the authenticity of the personal identity. People and the society may be that way, I guess. This is not simply data bias issues. This is a sort of identity theft, replacing true identity with a fake identity. So we need to include the international rulemaking for artificial intelligence, generative AI in particular, in our scope of consideration of the future of neurotechs. In connection with this point, in the first place, a more accurate investigation on the scientific credibility of neurotech is also needed. So I find the title of Milena's great papers, the title goes like this: Between Science Fact and Science Fiction. This title is very suggestive, I think. So currently, the development of and the commercialization of neurotech is proceeding almost without any established legal framework. As a commercialization and the marketing goes on this way, pseudoscience or market gimmicks seem to be prevailing. This is in the future. No, not the future. This is happening now. So in addition to the legal framework, there is another need for, how can I put this, certification bodies, public or private, or evidence check institution that can verify the credibility of the neurotech and open it to the public citizens about whether the technology has been scientifically tested or verified based on scientific evidence. So finally, I would like to propose one thing, only one thing. A follow-up task force should be established in the relevant part of the Human Rights Council. In response to this report, member states will in the future developing their national laws and the regulations. The legal framework and the procedures for its formulation will vary from country to country. Various ways of the legal articulation may emerge, reflecting some cultural differences or differences in the political systems or difference in the historical background for each countries. In Japan, perhaps if the government do it based on this report, a basic law should be enacted in the first place. Basic law is a kind of a framework legislation with basic goals and encouraging the formulation of specific related legislations or regulations or guidelines, and also providing the financial resources, of course. So I guess it is very important for us here today to establish the follow-up task force or update task force and anything like that within the Human Rights Council that meets regularly to check various progresses, bring and share information on what's going on in each country to actualize this framework for future of the neurotech. So, and of course, these task force also have to do joint collaboration for mapping or integrating a representative concept of neural rights or freedoms and publish reference guidelines to encourage a member state effort to realize this report. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you very much for your reflections and also the interesting cultural perspective. We will now shift our being together, at least in the formal mode, a little bit by already taking the seats there, and we will now be joined by Marta Susana Varro. She is a legal scholar, among others working in international law at the University of Milan in Bicocca, and she has just written a book about law and neurotechnology, which we are all waiting to read. But now, Marta, please come up and give us some comments on the report. Thanks.
Thank you, Krista, for the kind introduction. I'm going to start by joining the president's speakers in thanking the organizers for this opportunity to comment this first report by the advisory committee. The first thing that I would like to highlight is that I find reading this report really eye-opening from different perspectives. First of all, because I think the advisory committee has done excellent and impressive work in condensating a lot of the debates that are ongoing And this is not easy at all. Like the report manages to touch upon very specific issues, but also policy issues, legal aspects, and in really a short amount of pages. It's 23 pages, including an annex. So it's really an impressive effort. I am going to concentrate myself on highlighting three. I have chosen three aspects that have struck me the most, because I think they're relevant and they're innovative in the way that they have been approached in the report. And those are, I'm just gonna highlight them to go to later on go into the details. The first one is the central role that has been attributed in this report to soft law. The central role that has been attributed in the construction of the human rights protective framework to which Section 5 is dedicated to. The second one, and this might be controversial. Many of the scholars here, I know already that won't agree with me, but I understand that this report is one of the first policy soft law documents that takes a position on neuroenhancement. And I think this is very brave, and I think it's worth discussing it and worth highlighting it. Third, I would like to highlight what I think is an important contribution of this report that has to do with the fact that it has stressed the importance of distinguishing the settings of applications of neurotechnology. So it has actually highlighted the fact that different criteria should be applied on the basis of the context, the set in which neurotechnologies are being applied. And in particular, the report concentrates on looking at this in the workplace, in the criminal justice sector, and in the military sector. So starting with the first aspect that I think is worth commenting. There are many parts of the report that call for the adoption of a guiding document and a soft law document that expresses the main applicable principles and standards that are to be applied to neurotechnology. But not only does the document call for a specific declaration or a specific soft law document that guides the interpretation or reformulation of human rights to be applied in this context, but it also recalls other aspects of international law, if we want to call it like this, but other aspects of soft law, for example, the UN guiding principles that we know are soft law, but that have been also introduced in the report as an important tool to take into consideration when enforcing human rights system in this context. Another reference to the importance of soft law can be found, for example, in paragraph 83, where there is a specific reference to the urgent need to draft general comments to clarify and strengthen the human rights protection of rights that are linked to the foreign internment. Specifically, you mentioned the urgent need to draft a general comment on Article 18 of the ICC PR and on Article 17 of the Convention for People with Disabilities. So these are specific recommendations that are grounded and that are solidly actually grounded on soft law instruments that are already there in the UN system to be used. No? So I think that by doing this, so emphasizing the importance of soft law to address the challenge that is at stake, this report is also reflecting the paradigm shift that is happening currently within the classical theory of sources of international law. So international law is not formed anymore just by treaty, hard law instruments that take states to discuss and then ratify documents. But we have to understand that given the rapid changing environment context in which we live, we have to accept the importance of instruments of like the ones you have been mentioning, and the importance of soft law in enforcing and making really applicable and real the human rights systems of protection. So I think this is a contribution that the report does, and a very important one. That's the second contribution that I found interesting in the report is more a question than a comment. because I would like maybe from you a confirmation of whether I have understood this correctly. But I understand that there are two elements in this report that suggest that the authors or the advisory committee have a specific opinion on the question of neuroenhancement. One element is that there are only 2 paragraphs dedicated to the question of human augmentation of health individuals, just 2 paragraphs. And actually, this is done mostly in worrying terms, like unresolved concerns, skepticism, scientific basis of those developments remain highly speculative, precaution is needed, too rapid or wide, I'm quoting parts of the report now, too rapid or wide access to unproven technologies to cognitive augmentation could introduce new sorts of public health related problems. So this is one aspect, the limited amount and the worrying terms in which they are introduced in the report. And the second is that all throughout the report, the advantages of neurotechnologies seem to be circumscribed to the medical applications of neurotechnologies. So in particular, I flagged some paragraphs. For example, paragraph 32 talks about the importance of making sure that neurotechnologies are accessible to people to ensure the right to health. Reference to the international bioethic bodies that advise that the development of neurotechnologies should first focus on medical applications. So I think it's important to highlight this because if we want to discuss about the substance, any balance exercise must take into consideration the real context of the interests that are at stake in this discussion. So I think this is something that is done in this report. And it also has managed to evidence that the potential benefits of non-medical uses of neurotechnologies are still unclear. And this message is conveyed in a very clear way in the report. The third comment that I would like to make today has to do with the importance of distinguishing the settings of applications and the fact that the report identifies the 3 areas where risks are greater, that is the workplace, military setting, and the criminal justice settings. I won't go into the details of this third comment because, I mean, each one of them would deserve special attention and really in-depth comments, but I think it's important to highlight that we need to adapt the criteria that we use into the specific set. Otherwise, we risk remaining in a too abstract and not applicable level. Another, finally, I think I would like to comment on some of the proposals that the report makes. I specifically would like to endorse the proposal of establishing a human rights advisory service, which I understand is an organ or a reality that would ensure consistency in interpreting the standards of the legal regulations that single states would eventually implement at a domestic level. I wonder how this is going to work out in practice. So how is this advisory service imagined, whether there is any kind of collaboration with for example, with a special rapporteur on privacy that is envisioned, where there is a plan to nominate a special rapporteur on neurotechnology or not. So I would like, given that we're lucky enough to have Milena here today to comment on these aspects, to know whether in practice, how is this organ going to work in terms of funding and in terms of resources of people, human resources. And finally, I would finish my presentation with a reference to the right to science, which is mentioned in this report. I think the right to science has been mentioned, has been addressed in the scholarly writings, and it has even been defined as the sleeping beauty because it's a right that is recognized in the ICCPR, but has never really been applied. There has been recently a General Comment 25, which has tried to develop the content of this right, but it's a right that has never been really applied. There's no jurisprudence, there's no case law on this right. The report brings this right into the scene, and I think this is extremely interesting because if we look at what the content of this right is on the basis of what some soft law instruments have already tried to the way in which some of the soft law instruments have tried to define this right. It could be the perfect box or the perfect vehicle through which the debate on where we want to go with this technology, but not only with neurotechnology, but with any scientific or technological developments is. So because it says that the content of the right to science, it does not only cover the right to enjoy the benefits of science, but also the right to participate and to ensure that the society participates in the debates that kind of decide where we want to go as a society, what the common good is, what common interest is. So I think this is an opportunity to bring this rights into attention, under scrutiny again by the legal community, and yeah, and I think I will stop here to be able to have your responses. Thank you very much.
So first of all, thank you, Marta, and we will have time once I find out how to turn this on. How do we turn this on again? And then I would say, Milena, you can just reply, and then perhaps we get into a dialogue, and then if there are questions from the audience, you can already prepare and raise your hand, or so. I will try to integrate this.
Do you want me to respond?
If you want to, yes, please.
Okay, yes, very briefly, because I would like also to have the opportunity to listen to the audience and other people interested in the field. Thank you very much for your comments and so positive comments. Of course, I'm not the only author as the report of the advisory committee, but as rapporteur, I put a lot of energy, and it was not easy, to be truth. Also, I found out very in-depth literature coming from the ethical, bioethical community. The debate on neuro rights was really exciting, but at the same time, difficult to translate into actions, concrete actions to be proposed also at policy level. So, but I find like very grateful also for this exciting conversation. Just very briefly to some of the questions that Marta and also the previous speaker posed. I think the main that I could explain is this mechanism to start, which is this advisory service, which has been proposed. To say that this is just a proposal, I think it comes, to my knowledge, from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. So it's like a kind of mechanism which would be made up of also independent experts, so no staff of the UN, just people having their own background and supporting the activities on the human rights perspective. So that would be with the support, obviously, of the advisory office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in order to provide expertise also from the human rights perspective. But this would be a kind of proposal for the time being. I think it's a proposal which in certain way, it could be very good one as complement, because I mean, when I speak or when I see an advisory service, is above all an advisory service for states and also for private actors on how to implement human rights and how to develop these human rights impact assessments. So I think, and also providing guidance on understanding how to implement human rights in practice. But at the same time, I mean, I think from the human rights perspective and human rights system, UN system, the important thing is also the role of advocacy, and also to be critical to a certain state and also to a certain extent, and also to be able to do that publicly and to create a debate on issues that are important for society, also from political point of view, or where we are going as society from a broader perspective. So I think what other mechanisms, for example, special procedures, the special rapporteurs, apport to this, the added value of those mechanisms is this perspective of being publicly denouncing also, why not, what are or might lead to violations of human rights. And also with the view of protecting vulnerable people, and also denounce the asymmetries in power, and also the structural injustice. So I think it's important that this is not the only mechanism that we introduce in this area, but we keep also this more strict and denouncing and advocacy mechanism at the same time. With regard to the human enhancement, it was a specific request from members of the advisory committee, because I was aware of the difficulty of addressing this topic, and I read quite a lot. I started to read reports on the issue, and I found it complicated to understand. So I didn't feel myself like to establish categorical things. But I think what we try to look at that is from the precautionary principle. So I think it's a basic principle also from the ethical point of view. And so we obviously read the report of the UNESCO, and we thought that it's quite misleading also from a legal perspective, this terminology, which seems that it's something positive when we really don't know what we are speaking about. So I think it was very important, and I think also this distinction in between what is the uses for therapeutic uses or not, what is cognitive enhancement, what is not. I think there is a lot of an ambiguity in this area. And so I think from a legal perspective, when you don't know what you're talking about, you cannot endorse it. So this is more or less the explanation of what you understood as a much negative perspective or approach. As far as we can understand what we are speaking about, I think we will be able to provide another perspective. And I think it links this section also with the military domain, where, as we know, for example, in the NATO strategy on bioethics, the idea of augmented soldier is already introduced. So we are also speaking about genetical transformation, etc. So I think it's important also, it was very important also to introduce this, because this is what we are speaking about in reality, I think. So that was the idea also of this comprehensive report. And regarding the cognitive liberty, indeed, we didn't have the space. There is such a lot of literature on all the discussion. So I thought, since we are human rights, working for, within the UN system, the idea was to keep the framework that we have for the time being, but obviously, as we mentioned, it has to be nuanced on the light of the challenges being introduced by neurotechnologies, and that means also to introduce this kind of more in-depth or more nuanced concept within the framework of the rights that we have so far, I think. So because that links the ethical approach to the legal perspective and the capacity for lawyers to use what we have, and specifically the institutional framework we have so far to protect human rights. And what I tried to say was that we have to be very aware that our human rights system and mechanism are not developed at all at national level, and are not developed to defend people from the power of multinationals and the lobbying, etc. So I think from that perspective, it's very important that we are realistic and we not create false expectations on the capacity for us to really defend vulnerable people and normal people from potential violations or uses or misuses in this context. So that was also the point that I wanted to stress.
Thank you very much, Milena. So I would now open the floor to the audience. Are there any comments or questions to the rapporteur? Many of you have written on this topic.
Obviously, it would take weeks to make comments or to congratulate the work of HRC. Obviously, the main point we absolutely, I am Hervé Schneves, and I was the chair of IBC, and I recently co-chaired the expert group to draft the recommendations of UNESCO on neurotechnology. One main point is that we already at UN have discussions for 2 years, I think now, to try to coordinate the work of the various bodies, UN bodies, UNESCO, HRC, but now UNICEF, most likely WHO will want to join the group and others. So one thing is to try already to unify and most likely to include in the group the Council of Europe and other bodies that have the same goals. So moving from words and a few meetings, video conferencing, to reality, and to stop having these various reports to try to converge and to focus. Because in many ways, we say almost the same thing with different words. And in our recent draft, we tried to reduce the number of words. For example, in our 36 pages that are now online, and you can find the draft of the recommendation, you will find only once cognitive liberty. It's not a concept we are going to, because it's controversial. So we stay on freedom of thought, which is something which is already grounded, and we try to escape from useless controversies. So first, we need absolutely to converge. Two, we absolutely need to go to the real context, because all these discussions, and it's a physician and a neurologist who is speaking, obviously, but all these discussions are really in the blue if you don't take consideration for the context. And I'm going to take just an example outside of medical use. If you think about the workplace, and if you think about what is possible now with glasses to monitor your level of attention and your cognitive fatigue, if someone is using that to monitor her or his own activity, it's freedom. You can do what you want with your own activity, and it could be good, because when you are too tired, you stop, you take a rest, you breathe. Okay. But now the question, and the main question is, who is collecting the data? Is it only your computer, or does anyone, or especially your company, have access to your computer? And then the next step is, if they have access to this data, is it for your good? You are working too much and you are going to burn out? Or is it to evaluate you in the quality of your work? So the context of collecting, analyzing is essential. So nothing is real out of the context. And nothing is real out of the way you are using this technology. And this is a great challenge, to my view, to human rights, because human rights are very general, but the reality is particular and real for each of us in a given context. And we have, if you create this task force, one of the main goals of the task force should be to elaborate scenarios considering the real context.
Thank you. Are there any other contributions? Elena, would you like to respond? Take the next. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Ludmila. Thank you very much. I am not familiar with the specific structure and possibilities of the UN, but I like the idea of having some independent certification organ that is independent from economic interests and preferably also affordable to everyone. Is there any possibility that the UN can initiate something like this? Is there any action inducing organ, or is it stopped to this policy advisory work, and then somebody else has to take on from there?
Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, I will start by this late question, and then I will make some comments. There is, I mean, for example, advisory committee, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are not free to decide whatever we want to do. To start, this research, this topic arrived to our committee, in this case, because we made a research proposal to the Council, and the Council, which is an intergovernmental body made up of 47 states, which change each year, the composition, they endorsed or adopted a resolution and asked us to prepare this study. So to make clear that organizations today are controlled and under the decision of the states. So this is one thing that we have to be realistic about. So in that context, there are margin of maneuver in the sense that, for example, we have this project of BTEC within the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, which are helping business on the implementation of this framework mentioned by Marta of the guiding principles on by business and human rights, for example. So this is a point of entry also for many organizations to also help in building a framework that constrain also business to produce neurotechnology for the good. So I think all these are instruments that we should explore in order to that. And for example, within this framework, it has already been proposed and it's been negotiating this treaty on responsibility also of multinationals in regard with vis-a-vis human rights obligations. So I think these are possibilities, but all depends very much on the willingness of the states and negotiations, diplomatic negotiations, and what they decide. And for example, in an ideal scenario, these guiding principles or draft that we are proposing would need, first of all, a resolution from the Human Rights Council so that the states decide that they agree that they want that we go in that direction. Then obviously another step would be, for example, if states agree and what we produce, which will be very abstract and general, traduce that into a declaration endorsed by the Human Rights Council, and in a future that could lead to the creation of an intergovernmental group, and that could lead into a treaty. That would be the best possible scenario, but obviously to arrive at that, we have to be clear on what we want that a future treaty, or if there is a need of that. So I think this is the issue. And that brings me to the question or the comment. I agree that there is a need of coordination, obviously, because I saw the huge effort and thinking of many scholars, many people, and this can be brought into the international organizations working on that. But I think it's also necessary to be aware that sometimes we give visibility to certain and not to other opinions. So I think that also this idea of expert groups should not overshadow other possibilities and ideas and thinking. So I think we need a brainstorming collective in this issue. And the good thing, I think, from the report, and was mentioned also by Marta, it was this idea of doing different sections which has triggered or can trigger also this reflection within the different organizations. So we have already UNESCO, not only because of us, obviously also the UNESCO has already done that. We have already the UNESCO, maybe also the International Labour Organization may start to produce something specific on the uses in the workplace. So I think it's important that these standards are the convergence also of all these different people working from different perspectives to create something which is meaningful. And I agree with the context specific, but also I would introduce another context specific, which is the big picture, because we are very much looking into the council. When you follow the session of the council, you can see, and you listen to the special rapporteurs, you see really the reality of human rights in the world. So I think it's also necessary that we keep the idea of where we are and what we have today in conflict terms, in war terms, and how these technologies are going to be or introduced for the better or for the worse. And that because of that, I finished my presentation with that we need to find also the momentum for that. But I'm sure you are all experts working on that. So I would like also to be enlightened by your opinions during the whole day, and specifically also on the human augmentation issue. So I will be from now listening to you.
Perhaps there's a last question that you need to answer. Then you can listen. Marcelo.
Yeah, well, first of all, I also wanted to congratulate Milena and the whole advisory committee for producing this outstanding report, which I believe will mark a milestone in neurotechnology policy, together with the UNESCO recommendation, the Council of Europe's upcoming reports and guidelines, and the OECD recommendation from 2019, which set the first bar in the field. And just to have a comment and a question, the comment I really wanted to echo what Hervé said. I think creating a convergence between all these documents that are being produced is fundamental, because otherwise we have a risk of volatility. If all organizations operate independently, then there is a risk that the translation into action will be undermined. And this is actually one of the reasons why we organized this conference, to create a platform for the various organizations to speak to each other and find potential synergies. The question is, and I must, as a premise, I should say the document is really good, and I agree with it 99%. But there is a point where I would like to challenge you a little bit. And so when we talk about the relationship between neurotechnology and human rights, that relationship is usually twofold. So on the one end is prohibiting or preventing human rights violations that are caused by the misuse of neurotechnology. And on the other hand is promoting human rights through neurotechnology use. So for example, neurotechnology to support the rights of people with disabilities and so on. And in the report, it seems that these two things are not mentioned in a symmetrical way. So there is a much more pronounced focus on preventing human rights violations than promoting human rights. So I wanted to ask if this is an intentional choice, or if not, why? And then related to this, the report also has a clear distinction, and Marta was emphasizing this, between medical and non-medical uses, and it's arguing that medical uses can produce benefits, whereas the benefits of non-medical uses are unclear, and I would agree with that. However, non-medical means a lot of things. So there are a lot of different applications, and some of them, for entertainment and consumer use, may have very questionable evidence at base, but there are, for example, neurotechnology applications for research use that are not medical, strictly speaking, but still their benefits are fundamental. And without those research applications, we wouldn't have the clinical applications at all, because we cannot cure what we cannot understand. So we need neurotech to understand the brain before we can actually use neurotech to cure the brain. So I just wanted to hear what you think about this. And thank again for the report and for this outstanding panel.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Marcello. You were inspiring as well with all your publications. And indeed, I didn't mention all the international organizations, OCDE, also the Council of Europe, that have been working also with this topic, but this is already in the report, so I'm covered. Yeah, indeed, that would be the criticism to the report. But I will explain why. I mean, I think the piece that I thought it was missing, and we, from the human rights perspective, thought it was missing in the whole puzzle, it was this more approach into the risks. What are the risks? Because in order to open the opportunities, we have to deal, first of all, with the challenges. And I think there is a lot of, positive intention also in providing, first of all, and opening the eyes to people on the reality on a human rights framework, what we have and what we need. And I think it's also important that we understand that human rights are not being promoted at all, not even in certain, states. So that was our main concern also in to provide this more panoramic overview. And also sometimes we have the trend to think that, for example, in Switzerland, we have a good framework, research is frame, control, but in other countries, this is not the case. So also in a report at the UN level, we have to also think on the different context that we are talking about. So we have to be much more protective in that sense. But at the same time, I understand also that, it is for granted, it's given for granted that we are not thinking about, obstacle, the research or in medical applications, etc., but just to calling the attention and raising awareness on the risks that we have to solve. And also, above all, I think on the need to think that progress is not just technology, it's also progress in social protection, in legal development, and this idea that law always lie behind technological advancement. I think we should also think about that and make also progress law in a parallel manner. So that was a bit but obviously the promotion, I think, could be in another, in some years' time, maybe we progress before in creating this protective framework, we could be openly speaking about protection, but I think the technology is not mature enough today as to include this just promoting aspect, but that's my personal view as well. So I accept the challenging on that. But we include a very long annex with, we took very much from, if not all, from your input in the opportunities, and also a lot from the UNESCO report on the medical applications. So I think that was covered also and provides a very good perspective for people on, the great opportunities that we are facing as well.
Thank you, Milena. We are already out of time. So, and this was already a very nice transition to our next panel, because on our next session, we will hear actually from representatives of all the organizations that have now already been